Hello and good evening everyone. Thank you for joining me today in this session. So today in this session we are going to begin solving a new project, which is the 0x04 more functions, more nested loops. Okay, so this is a continuation or a bit advanced than the previous playlist we had on 0x02 functions, nested loops. Okay, so before I begin solving examples, as you can see here, we are supposed to work on this directory here, repository, sorry. I'm already in that repository, and then I went ahead and created this directory here, which is this, right? And I cd into the directory. So inside the directory, let me show you, I already have my readme.md. So make sure you create your readme.md and make sure that it is not empty. I went ahead and created my header file. Let me give you a preview of the header file. So just look at it. This is my header file. I have added 3 prototypes, that is the prototypes of the first 3 tasks here, which I hope we are going to solve in this particular video. So that's why I added the prototypes here. So we are going to solve from task 0 to task 3 to task 2, sorry, in this video. Okay, so make sure you have your prototypes inside your main.h, and don't forget to guard your header file. All right, so let's begin solving examples. This says we should write a function that checks for uppercase character. Okay, so this is the prototype here, and it says that we should return 1 if C is uppercase. C here is the parameter that the function is taking, right? So the function is supposed to check for whatever C is and return 1 if C is uppercase and return 0 otherwise. Okay, so let's copy the file name first. Let's open the file, vi. All right, so we need to include our header file, right? Hash include main.h. Sorry, let me zoom in a bit. Yeah, I think it's better this way. Main.h. Then copy the prototype. All right, copy, and I'm going to paste this here. All right, so it says we should write a function that checks for uppercase character. So I need to set a condition if C is an uppercase or if C is a lowercase, right? So all I need to say is if this C here, this particular character here, the parameter, sorry, if C is greater than or equals to what? Capital letter A in this case. Since I'm considering what? Uppercase, right? And also that same C is less than or equals to capital letter Z. So with this, I'm able to target everything between capital A and capital Z, including the A and Z themselves, right? So this will target all the 26 alphabets in capital letters. That's why I'm using what? Capital A here and capital Z. Okay, so and what does the question says? It says it should return 1 if C is uppercase. So I'll just say return, and then here I will say 1. That is, if C is uppercase, it should return 1. So else, that is otherwise, right, it should return 0. So I just say return 0 here. As simple as this. So don't forget, let's document our Betty, right? So what's the function name? The function name is upper, right? So I will just say checks for uppercase character, right? And then what does the function return? It returns 1 on success, right? 1 on success, 0 on failure, right? So I can do something like this. Then what again? Okay, I need to, the parameter, the function has a parameter, so I need to tell Betty about that parameter. So it is called @C, right? So I will just say function parameter, or you can say parameter to be checked anyhow. So let's save this. Let's run Betty on the file. Betty 0. Okay, no description found for its upper. I think I've described that already. Is upper. I don't know what the okay. Yeah, this is supposed to be another asterisk. Yeah, a double asterisk. I guess that's the reason. So let's run Betty again. Yeah, so Betty is happy now. So let's create the test file and see, is it this task? Yeah, this is the task. So I'll just say vi 0 main.c, right? Paste. So here I need to hash I. All right, so let's compile and see if we will get the desired output. Alright, so it has been compiled. Let's run the compiled file. Yeah, so as you can see, we got 1 and 0 here. So this is just saying that when you look at this, when the function is being called, capital A was passed to the function, right? And capital K is what is an uppercase. That's why the function returns a 1, right? And here a small letter A was passed to the function. That's why 0 was passed here. Sorry, was printed it as the output. Okay, so don't forget to add, commit, and push to your GitHub repository, and then you can run your checks. So let's move on to the next task. So this task here says we should write a function that checks for a digit 0 through 9. Okay, the function should check for digit 0 through 9. So we are only checking for from 0 to 9, right? So let's open the file first, and then we'll begin to explain as we're writing the code. Sorry, so pastes. So we need to include our hash include main.h, right? So the function prototype is this. Copy. All right, so we are looking forward 0 through 9, right? So the function takes in a parameter c, right? So I need to say if c. So now in this case, I'm going to use the ASCII code of 0 and also 9 to check this. Okay, I'm going to use the ASCII code. I've tried using the normal digits 0 through 9, but I found out that it's not working. I don't know why. But when I run when I solve the problem using the ASCII, I found the exact answer, and I found the exact answer, and the checker was able to check it correctly. Okay, so I guess for this question we are supposed to use the ASCII code. So let's check what's the ASCII code of 0. So this is, where is 0? Yeah, so this is 0 here. So the ASCII code for 0 is 48, right? So I would say if c is greater than or equals to 48, since I'm targeting from 0 to 9, right? So, and also, right, it has to be what? Not greater than what? 9. And the ASCII code of 9 is 57. So, and also c less than or equals to 57. So this way, I've targeted from 0 to 9, right? So if this condition is true, right, what shall happen? It says return 1 if c is a digit. So I'll just say return what? 1, right? So else what? Else it says we should return a 0. So I'll just say return 0 here. So here I need to document my Betty. So I'll just say is digit, right? Is digit. So function that checks, right, for 0 through 9. Okay, so it doesn't have to be long, just a brief explanation or description of your function. So and the parameter at c, right? So I just say function, or let me say parameter to be checked, parameter to be checked, right? And then what again? The return type, sorry, return 1 on success and 0 on failure, right? Failure. All right, so we've documented Betty. So let's run Betty first and see if Betty is happy with our code. Yes, Betty is fine. So we can move ahead and create our test file to see if our function is working the way it's supposed to work. So vi, this is one main.c. So paste here. So I need to make some correction here. All right, so the next thing for us is to compile our program and see. So copy the compilation command, paste. Yes, so it has been compiled without any error. So let's run the compiled file. Yeah, so as you can see here, we are getting the same answer. 0, we got what? We got 1. A, we got what? We got 0 here, right? So when you look at this, as you can see, this is 0, right? So 0 is passed to the function, is digit. So we said that if it is a digit, it should what? Return 1. That's why we are having 1 here. It will print 0 and then it will print the return value, right? And for this case here, a character is passed to the function. As you can see, it is A. So that's why we are having 0 here. We said if it is not a digit, it should return a 0, right? I believe this is clear. So don't forget to add, commit, and push to your GitHub repository, and then you can run your checks. So let's move on to the next task. All right, so this task here says we should write a function that multiplies two integers. This is very easy. This is one of the simplest project I think on functions, or in fact on ALX project entirely. This is most simple, just like the addition, right? We just say a plus b, right? So that's what we are going to do here, or similar. So let's open the file vi. All right, so here I will need to include my main.h, right? So main.h. So let me just document my Betty here. So by looking at this, I know that my function name is what? Is mul. Just look at this. My function name is going to be mul. So I just say mul function that multiplies two integers, isn't it? And then the next one is what? After mul. So the function parameters we have at a, right? So I will just say parameter 1. We also have at b, right? So let me just call this parameter 2, right? So I think I misspelled this. Yeah, parameter 2. And then what again? The return value, right? Sorry, the return statement. So I just say return, sorry, in caps, return. Why am I missing the caps? Yeah, return. So what is the function going to return? A times b. Yeah, let me just put it something like this. Yeah. All right, so let's begin writing the code. So all what we're going to do inside this is simply just say return, then in bracket you say a times b. So that's just what you need to do about this function. So the function will return whatever the value of a is times whatever the value of b is. So this way you will have a function that multiplies two integers. So let's exit. Let's run Betty on the file. 2 mul. Yeah, so Betty is fine. So let's go ahead and create our test file, just to make sure that our file is working. Sorry, our function is working the way it's supposed to work. Main.c. So paste. So here I need to say hash include, right? All right, so let's compile and let's see if our function is working. So compile. Yes, so it has been compiled. So let's run the compiled file. Yeah, so as you can see, we got exact the same output. So when you multiply 98, just look at the first case here. It is 98 and what? 1024. So it is going to multiply 1024 98 times, right? Or 98 1024 times. So if you do the arithmetic, you're going to get exactly something like this. Same as this, if you multiply minus 402 with 4096, you are going to get a negative this number here. So it means that our function is working the way it's supposed to work. So when you look at my header file here, I have the prototype for the task 3, which is this, and that of task 4, which is this, and that of task 5 as well. So these are the three project, or these are the three tasks we will be solving today in this particular video. So that's why I added 3 prototypes here. All right, so now let's save and exit this. All right, so this says we should write a function that prints the numbers from 0 to 9. So we are going to print numbers from 0 to 9. So just look at the output here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to 9. But in this case, we are going to use putchar, right? So let's open the file first and let's see how we can solve this problem. So vi, I need to paste this. So the first I need to do is to include my main.h, right? So main.h. So I'll copy the function prototype, this, and paste here. Right? So what we need to do here is we are going to need a loop, right, to iterate from 0 to 9. And for each iteration of this loop, we are going to print the value of I, right? So all I need to do is I'll just say int I. I'm going to use this for my looping. Then I will say for I equals to 0. Since I'm beginning my iteration from 0, I need to initialize I to be 0. And what should be the condition? I should be less than 10, right? Or you can say I should be less than or equals to 9. If you are using less than or equals to, you should be with 9. If you are using just less than, you can say 10. Because 10 is not included here. It says 0 to what? To 9. Then what again? Then I plus plus. So now I have this loop, and this loop is going to loop entirely from what? From where? From 0 to 9. So what happens is, for each iteration, I want to print the value of I. The first iteration, I will be 0. The second iteration, it will be 1. Third iteration, 2, up to 9. So for each iteration, I want to print the value of I. but I'm told to use putchar function, right? So all I need to do is I'll just say putchar and then I'll say I. But in this case, if I should leave it like this, it will not work, because putchar only print characters, and I here is holding what? A digit, an integer. So putchar will not be able to print this. So to be on the safer side, I need to convert the value of I into what? A character. So I will now say what? I'll just say plus, then open a single quote and add a 0 inside the single quote. So this way, this I here, which is a digit, will be converted to a character, and putchar will be able to print the value of I. If you leave it without the conversion to character, putchar will not print it, because I is a digit. But with this, you've converted the digit to a character, so putchar will be able to print it. And as you can see here, we are told to use putchar only twice in our code, right? And it says what? Followed by a new line. So I need to create another putchar now outside the loop, so that after it finished printing from 0 to 9, it will go to a new line. So I need to add a /n here. I believe this is clear. So the next thing I need to do is let me document my Betty. So what is my function name? My function name is print numbers, right? Then I will say print numbers from 0 to 9, right? So the next thing is what? Is just the return type, since the function is not taking any parameter. So I just say return. It's returning a void, right? So I can just close this. So now let me run Betty on this. So Betty 3. Yeah, so as you can see, Betty is fine. So let's create the test file and see if the function is working. So this is 3main.c, right? So here I need to paste. So I need to make this small adjustment. Hash, right? All right, so the next thing is for us to compile the program. So compile, paste. So press enter. Yeah, so as you can see, it has been compiled without errors. So let's run the compiled file. Yeah, so as you can see, we got from 0 to what? To 9 printed. So let's try using this same command as their own and see if we will have the $sign appended at the end of the output. Yeah, so as you can see, it is correct. We have the $sign now appended at the end of our output. So the next thing you need to do is add commit and push to your GitHub, and then you can run your checks. So let's move to the next task. So this task here says we should write a function that prints the numbers from 0 to 9 followed by a new line. This is the prototype, and do not print 2 and 4. You can only use putchar twice in your code. So this is similar to the previous task we solved, but in this case, we are not printing everything from 0 to 9. Instead, we are printing from 0 to 9, excluding 2 and 4. Right? So let me open the file. All right, so let's include our main.h. Main.h. In fact, let me just document my Betty here, since from the prototype I can see what I need. Print most numbers, right? Most numbers. Yeah. So print 0 to 9, excluding, right? Excluding 2 and 4, isn't it? Then what again? I think that's all. Yeah, it's returning a void and it's not taking any parameter. So I will just say return void here. So close this. So I will paste the prototype here. Sorry, I'm supposed to paste the prototype, not the file name. So I need to copy the prototype again. Copy. All right. So what we need to do here is we need to do the same thing as the previous task here. We are going to need a loop to loop from 0 to 9, right? So I'll just say int I. This will help me loop this variable. I'm going to use it to loop from 0 to 9. So I will say I is equals to 0. I'm starting from 0, right? What's the condition? I'm stopping at 9, so I less than 10, right? Then I plus plus. So what do I need to do inside this for loop? Note that I'm not printing everything from 0 to 9. Right? I'm only printing what? 0 to 9 excluding 2 and 4. Okay? So I need to set a condition that if my value of I, since I know that my I is going to iterate up to what? 9, it will include 2 and 4 in the iteration. But I don't want to include 2 and 4 while printing the value of I. So I need to set a condition that if my value of I is not equals to 2, right? And also the value of I is not equals to 4. So it is only when this condition is true that I want to what? Print the value of I, right? So I just say underscore putchar here, then I will say what? I, isn't it? I will say I plus what? I need to convert it to what? To a character. So I plus 0. Right? Isn't it? So after printing all these things, what else do I need to do? I need to come here and print a new line. So underscore put car, then this and the backward slash n here. So what this is going to do is simply for each iteration, it will start from 0 up to 9. Right? So it will check if I is not equals to 2 and I is not equals to 4. That is the only case when the put car will print the value of I. So it means that if the value of I is 2 and the value of I is 4, it will not print the values. Okay? It will not print the values. Do you get it? So let's test this. So let's run Betty first on this for, okay, it says trailing white space on line 11. So let's see. Line 11, I need to set number. Okay, this is line 11 here. It says trailing white space. Let's check. Yeah, there is a space. So I've removed the space. Run Betty. Yeah, Betty is fine now. So let's create the test file and see. So vi for main.c. So paste. So make this adjustment here, #i. Alright, so let's compile the program and see if the output is correct. So paste and then run. Yeah, so it has been compiled. So let's run it. So as you can see, we got 0, 1, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 2 and 4 is not included in our output here because we've already set a condition that only if the value of I is not equals to 2, and for that is when we want the put car part to be executed. Okay, and as you can see, we've not used more than 2 put cars in our code. So don't forget to add, commit, and push to your GitHub, and then you can run your checks. So now let's move on to the next task. So this task here says we should write a function that prints 10 times the numbers from 0 to 14 followed by a new line. You can only use putchar 3 times in your code. So just look at this. We are going to print from 0 to what? To 14. How many times? 10 times. So by looking at this, you know that we are going to need 2 loops, a nested loop. The first loop will keep track of how many times we will get the numbers printed, and the second loop will what? Will keep track of what? Printing the numbers from 0 to 14. The first one will keep track of how many times 0 to 14 will be printed, and the second one will keep track of printing 0 to 14. Okay, so now what do we need to do first? Let's open the file. This. So vi, open it, paste. Alright, so I need to include my main.h first. Include main.h, right? So sorry, here, so I need to copy the function prototype. Before that, let me document Betty. So what's my function name? More numbers, right? More numbers, I think that's the name. Yeah, more numbers, right? So I will just say print numbers from 0 to 14, right? That's what the function should do. So the next thing is what? I think that's all. It's returning a void and it's taking a void as well. So I just say return void. So here I will pass in the prototype. So what do we need to do? Like I said, we are going to need 2 loops, right? So I'm going to declare 2 variables for this iteration. So the first one, I'm going to call it I, and the second one, I'm also going to call it G here. So now I have these 2 variables. So now let's loop over the number of times the alphabet, the digit 0 to 14 will be printed. So I is equals to 0, and what should be the condition? I should be less than 10, because we want to print how many times? 10 times. So if you count from 0 to 9, that is when you will get 10. So if you include 10 in this case, if you are counting from 0 and you include 10, you are going to get 11. So that's why I said less than 10. Just count from 0 to 9, you get 10, right? So I just say I plus plus here. Alright, so now I have this loop which is going to keep track of the number of times the digit 0 to 14 will be printed. So the next one is to loop over the digit 0 to 14. So j is equals to 0, right? I'm starting from 0, right? Then what should be the condition? J is less than or equals to what? 14, right? Or you can say j is less than 15 here. Anyhow you do it, okay? So j is less than 15, right? Because I'm looping how many times? I'm printing from what? 0 to 14. That's why I use less than 15. So 15 will not be included. Or let me just do something like this for you. I think it will be better. Less than or equals to 14. Right? From 0 to 14. Then what again? Then G++. So now I have this loop. So what do I need to do inside this loop? So inside this loop, I will just print the value of what? I will print the value of J. Because J is the variable that is holding the values 0 to 14, which is what I want to print. So I'll just say putchar here, right? And then I will say, I need to say J, right? Then plus, then 0, because I need to convert it to what? To an integer, right? So here, outside the for loop, after printing everything, before moving to the next iteration, I need to what? Use putchar. So it means after printing 0 to 14, before the value of I moves to the next iteration, that is before moving to the next line here, we need to what? Pass a /n, right? So it will print a new line before I moves to the next iteration. So outside the for loop, I need to print another putchar, right? I need to print putchar /n. This means that after everything, it will print a new line at the end of the output. So I need to indent this to this part here. All right, so let's test this. Let's first run Betty. 5 more. Don't worry, I'm sure this is not this code here we wrote is not going to work. I did that intentionally. I just want to explain a concept for you, so that's why I did not write the code the way it's supposed to. Okay, so it's not going to work. It's not going to give us the correct output, and I'll explain why we won't get the correct output when we see the output. All right, so let's compile and let's see what we are going to get for this program. So paste this. Yeah, so it's been compiled. So let's run the compiled file. So did you see what I was telling you, that we are not going to get the correct output? Why? Just look at this. We only got from 0 to 9 printed. All this remaining part, we are just getting something that is meaningless actually. So why are we getting this? Why are we getting only 0 to 9? Because we are using the putchar function, and putchar only prints a character. So that's why it cannot be able to print 10, because 10 is not a character, because it has more than one digit, right? All these ones you are seeing here, they just have one digit, 0, 1 to up to 9. But 10 contains what? 1 and 0. So because it is 2 digits, or let me say 2 character, it will not print it. Do you get it? It will not print it. So we need to do something to get putchar print this 2 digit for us. So let me explain something here. Let me open the file. Sorry, not this. If I should say vi, not this actually. Yeah. So what we need to do here is simply this. Before I make the corrections, let me do something here. Instead of saying j plus 0, what if I do something like this? J modulo 10. What will this do here? What is this going to do to the function? This is going to get the last digit of the number, right? So assuming I have something like this, let's say 25, and I say modulo 10. Sorry, not 25. I'm dealing with single digit now. So let's say I have 5, right? 5 is the same thing as what? 0, 5. Isn't it? It is the same thing. So if I say 5 modulo 10 here, it is going to fetch what? It is going to fetch 5 for me, because 5 here is the same thing as this. So if you use modulo 10 with this, we know that modulo 10 will get the last digit, right, which is the remainder. So we are going to get what? 5 printed, right? So it means that I can do something like this and it will print the same thing for me, right? Let's test this and see if we are going to get the same thing, like I said. So let's run this 5. So did you see? We got what? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 9 in this case, right? We got up to 9, then it's come back from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 again, right? So what I'm saying here is I'm after from 0 to 9 here. I just want to show you that that particular command here, or that particular code we wrote, the modification we just made, is also going to be able to print this value for us, right? It's also going to print this value for us. The reason why we are getting this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 is because 0 is the last digit of 10. That's why we are having this. And 1 is the last digit of 11. 2 is the last digit of 12. 3 is the last digit of 13, and 4 is the last digit of 14. So it means this particular code here is able to get what? The last digit of the number for us, right? So all I need to do now is I need to set a condition. I'm just explaining that to kind of show you a concept. So all I need to do here is inside this for loop, I need to set a condition. I need to say if the value of j, right? If j is greater than 9, right? That is from 10. Right? from 10 to 14. If j is greater than 9, then what should we do here? If j is greater than 9, this is what I want to do. I want to print the first digit now. Since this command here is responsible for printing the last digit, then all I want now is to print the first digit, because as you can see from the previous example or the output I just closed, let me just show you. From this, as you can see, we are just getting what? The last values, right? So how can we get the 1 printed before this 0? How can we get the 1 printed before this 1 printed before 2, 1 printed before 3, so that we get 10, 11, 12, 13. Right? So now we have the last digit printed from this part. Now all what we are after now is printing the first digit. So how do we print the first digit of a number? It's simply, we use the divisor operator, right? So all I need to do, I'll just say put car, I'll just say j divide by 10. So I will just say plus 0. I need to convert it to what? To a character. So now what it's going to do is it will check if the value of j is now greater than 10. So it knows that we are dealing with what? Double numbers, right? From 10, sorry, greater than 9. So we are dealing from 10 to what? To 14, since our loop is going to stop at 14. So it will first print the first digit, and then it will print the second digit, right? Then it will go and print the first digit again, then print the second digit. Do you get it? Up to 14. So let's test this and see. So let's run the compiler. Yes, so let's run it. So as you can see, we are now getting from 0, 1 to up to 14. But we are having an extra space here. So let's deal with this space, vi. I think after this, so now we are supposed to remove this part. So I can remove this here. Sorry, I can remove this. Okay, so now I have what? Used just 3 putcars. So after all the looping, it will just print a new line. So as you can see, you have 1, 2, and 3. So let's run the file again. So compile. Before that, let me run Betty and see if Betty is happy. What's the file name? 5. Okay, 5 more. Oops, not this. .c. Yeah, so Betty is happy. Did I compile? Yeah. So let's run the compiled file. So as you can see, we have from 0 to 14 printed. Okay, I believe this example is also clear, right? So don't forget to add, commit, and push to your GitHub, and then you can run your checks. In this task here, we're told to write a function that draws a straight line in the terminal. So this is the prototype. You can only use putchar function to print, where n is the number of times the character underscore should be printed. The line should end with a /n, which is a new line. If n is 0 or less, the function should only print a new line. So what this is saying is we are to write a function to print a new line. Sorry, a straight line. And this straight line we are supposed to print, we are supposed to use this underscore character to print the line, right? And here, the parameter that this function is taking, which is n is the number of times the underscore should be printed. Let's look at the example here. As you can see here, 0 is passed to the function, and here a condition is said that if n is 0 or less, the function should just print a new line. So here, that's why we are not getting anything. Okay, so here when the function is called again, 2 was passed to the function, so it means that we are going to get underscore printed how many times? 2 times. So as you can see, we are having it 1, 2. So it is being printed 2 times, twice, right? So here when the function is called, 10 is passed, so it means the underscore will be printed how many times? 10 times. Just look at this. So it is printed 10 times, and here is a negative, and we've set a condition that if n is 0 or less, so it should print a new line. So it will not print anything. That's why we are getting this here, just a new line. So we are to write a function that do the same thing here. Okay, so now let's copy the function, the file name. When you look at my header file, let me open my header file. I've already pasted the prototype for this particular function here, the task 6, and also the next task, which is task 7. I already have the function prototype here. Okay, so now let's move on. Let's copy the file name, copy, then vi, then paste. Yeah, so hash include, we need to include our header file, right? Sorry, hash include main.h. So let me just document Betty. So what is my file name? Sorry, my function name is print line, right? So print line. Let me just say print straight line on the terminal, right? I think that's all. I think this is more descriptive, right? So what next? I need to print what? I need to explain the parameter n. So I'm going to say number of times the character, which is the underscore, right, will be printed, isn't it? So n, and then what again? I need to explain the return, right? So I will just say return, and this is not returning anything. The return value is void, so I will just say void here. So I'll close my Betty documentation. So now let me copy the function prototype, paste this. All right, so the first thing we need to do here is set the condition. It says if n is 0 or less, the function should print a new line. So all I'm going to do here is I'll just say if n, right, is what? Is 0 or less, is less than or equals to 0, right? So what should we do? We are asked to print a new line. So I'll just say put char, right, then a backward slash n. So now I have this condition set, right? So I'll just say else, that is if n is greater than 0, right? Since in the first case here we've considered less than and also equal to. So now the else part is going to consider for less than, sorry, for greater than 0. So I need to use a loop, right? Why do I need this loop? Because I'm only going to print this how many times? N times. So I need a loop to begin iterating from 0 up to the value of n, right? So what I'm going to do here is I will declare this variable I. So I will just say for I equals to what? I'm starting from 1. So what should be my condition? My condition should be less than or equals to what? The value n. Because n is the number of times we want to print the underscore, right? So we need to look from 1 up to n. If n is 2, we need to look from 1 to 2. If n is 5, we need to look from 1 to 5. If I'm to set this as 0, then I can remove this equality sign. Okay, you can set this to start from 0, but make sure you remove the equality sign since you are starting from 0. Okay, so here I will just say I plus plus. So this loop is going to loop from 1 to the number of n, right? So what should happen for each iteration? We want to print the underscore. This way we'll have the underscore printed how many times? N times. Okay, so I will now say underscore put char, and then I will pass in what? The underscore character. Do you get it? So for each iteration, underscore will be printed. So this way we'll have the underscore printed how many times? N times, right? So the next thing is what? We need to put a new line. So I'll just say put char. After all the looping, I need a new line to be printed. That's all. That's all we need for this. Okay, so let's test the function first. Let me run Betty. I just hope Betty should be happy with me. Yeah, Betty is happy. So I think I can create the test file. So I need to copy this. So vi, that's 6 main.c, right? So copy, paste this. So let me make this more changes. Hash include. All right, so let me compile this. So paste. Good, it has been compiled. So let's run the compiled file. Yeah, so as you can see, we are getting a space here. We are getting this printed. We are getting this printed, right? It means this is correct. So for us to get this $, we need to pipe this command into cat e, right? So that cat e will append the $sign at the end. So let's run this command with cat e and let's see. So did you see that we got the same output here, right? So the $sign has been appended at the end of each line. Did you see that? So now let's try changing something. If I should change 6 main, let me just change something. If I should change this now to, if I should add something, for instance, if I should say print, I'm just calling it again, and then I'll just pass underscore line, and then let me just pass 20. So this is going to print the line 20 times. So let's compile. All right, so let's run the compiled file. So did you see? This is where it is going to print it 20 times. So whatever value you add to it, it is going to what? It is going to print it that exact number of times. Do you get it? So let me just remove this part. Okay, so don't forget, add, commit, and push to a GitHub repository, and then you can run your checks. Okay, so just save, exit this, compile, run it. So as you can see, it's working fine now. Okay, so now let's move on to the next task. This task here says we should write a function that draws a diagonal line on the terminal. So this is a prototype. We can only use putCar function to print. N is the number of times the character should be printed. So in this case, we are using an underscore, sorry, a backward slash. In the previous task, we used an underscore because we are printing a new line. So sorry, a straight line. In this case, we are to use a backward slash because we are printing a diagonal line on the terminal. So the diagonal should end with a new line. If N is 0 or less, we should print a new line. So let's just look at the example here. So when you look at this, 0 was passed to the function, and that's why we're getting this, a new line, right? So when 2 was passed to the function, just look at this, we got 2 diagonals here printed. Do you see that? So when 10 was passed to the function, we got 10 diagonals printed. Just look at this. So when a -4 is passed to the function, because we are supposed to set a condition that if N is 0 or less, minus anything minus, we know that it's less than 0. So if it is less, we should print a new line. Okay, so that's why we are getting something like this here. So this is exactly how our function should work. Okay, so now let's copy the file name. Let's begin writing the code. So vi, all right, hash include main.h. So copy the function prototype. So I think before that I can document my Betty, right? So print diagonal. So what's the function name? Let me just say print diagonal using the backward slash character, right? I think this is okay. So the next thing is what? It's taking N as parameter. So I'll just say number of times the backward slash will be printed, or let me say should be printed. Yeah, anyhow, should be printed, right? Then what again? So I need to explain my return statement. So it's returning a void, so I'll just set void here. All right, so here I can paste this. So let's begin writing the code for this. So the first thing we need to do is to set a condition that says if N is 0 or less, we should only print what? Putcar, right? So I will just say putcar, sorry, I need to set the condition if N is less than or equals to 0, right? So we should what? Putcar, a new line. So backward slash N. That's what the condition says. Else. So else what should happen? Else what we need to do is this. We need to loop from what? From 0 to N, or from 1 to N, right? Because N is the number of times we need to print the diagonal. So we need to loop. For each loop, for each iteration in the loop, we need to use putcar to print the backward slash, right? So all I'm going to do here is I will just say for, sorry, I need to declare the variable I, which I'm going to use for my looping. So I will say for I equals to, now let me start from 0. If I is equals to 0, then what should be my condition? I less than N, right? If I'm starting from 1, it's going to be I less than or equals to N, right? I less than N, then I plus plus. So now I have this loop, right? So what do I need to do in this loop? In this loop, I need to print what? The backward slash. For each iteration, I need to print the backward slash. So I'll just say putcar here, putcar, and then inside this I'll add a backward slash. But this is not going to print the backward slash because the compiler is going to treat this as a special character, right? So to get a backward slash printed, you need to escape it, and the escape character is still this backward slash. So now if I want a backward slash to be printed, I need to add another backward slash here. So as you can see, even the color has changed here, right? So initially it was white, so now it's something of purple, right? So this will print what? Only one backward slash. So the first backward slash here is just telling the putcar that, okay, whatever that comes after me, just print it the way it is. Don't give it any special treatment, okay? Because if you don't put the escape character, it is considered as a special character, and special characters have their own functions on the terminal. Okay, so that's why you need to add an extra backward slash to get just single backward slash printed. I believe this is clear, right? So what's next? After printing it, then we need to print a new line, right? After printing the diagonals, right, we need to print a new line. So let me just say put car here and then a backward slash n, right? So let's try testing this. This is not going to work. Definitely this is not going to work. Let's create the test file. I just want us to follow everything step by step. That's why, okay? Definitely we are not going to get the correct answer, but because I want to explain a concept, that's why I did that. So let's add this hash include. All right, so now let's compile. Copy the compilation command. So we paste here. All right, so let's run it ./7. So did you see that we just got the backward slashes printed, right? They are supposed to be what? They are supposed to be indented. As you can see, there is spacing between them, right? There is spacing between them. So we need to add the spaces. Now we just have them printed, right? So now we need to add spacing between them. So how do we do that? Let's open our file. So to do that, we need to do something here, right? So when you look at this now, for this case, 2 is passed to the function. So we are expected to print what? The diagonal how many times? Twice, right? So for the first print of the diagonal, as you can see, there is no space. It's just the diagonal, right? But for the second one, there is a space. Just look at what I'm highlighting. As you can see, it is highlighting a space before what? Before the backward slash. But in this case, it is just highlighting a backward slash, no space, right? So just look at this case now. This case as well, there is no space. When you look at this, there is a space before the backward slash. And this one as well, there is 2 spaces before the backward slash. This one, there are 3 spaces. This one, 4 spaces. This one, 5 spaces before the backward slash. So as you can see, as the number or as the iteration increases, the size, or let me say the space you need to give them is also increasing, right? So here all I need to do is I need to set a condition, or I need to add another loop. And the aim of this loop is just to loop for me to be able to print what? The spaces, right? So let me declare another variable here, which I'm going to use for my looping. Let me call it j. So here all I'm going to do is I will just say for j equals to what? J should be also equals to 0, right? So the condition should be j should be less than or equals to what? Or equals to I, because the size of j depends on what? On whatever the value of I is. I just explained that, right? It depends on whatever the value of I is, then j plus plus here. So here inside my for loop, all I need to do is I'll just say put car, and then my put car is going to print a space here. That's all. So what I'm trying to say here is this. Considering, let's say my I is what? Is 2, or let me say n is 2, right? N is 2. So it will now start from this. I is equals to 0, right? So I is equals to 0. 0 is less than 2. Since my n is 2, right? This condition is true now. So it will jump into this loop. So it will begin j equals to 0. So j is less than or equals to I. My I, don't forget, is 0. And j is less than or equals to I. So it means this condition is true, because 0 is equals to what? 0. So since 0 is equals to 0, it is going to print what? A space. Do you get it? This condition is true, so it's going to print a space. Do you get it? Right? It's going to print a space. So it will now move to the next iteration. I is now what? I is now equals to 1, right? So it will now check this condition again. J is less than or equals to 0. 0 is less than or equals to 1, right? So 0 is less than or equals to 1, it will print put car, isn't it? And it will increment the value of j. When it increments the value of j, j will now be equals to what? J will now be equals to 1, right? J will now be equals to 1. Initially it was 0. So now it's going to be 1 less than or equals to 1, because my value of I is still 1. I'm talking about the second iteration of I. So it's going to be what? 1 equals to 1. So this condition is also true. So another space will be printed. That's why we are getting 2 spaces here. In some cases, we are getting 2 spaces, or we are getting a space before the word, the diagonal, right? So assuming my I is 5, right? Let's say my n is 6, right? Or let me consider my n is 10, okay? So if my n is 10, and my I here is what? Is 9, right? If my I is 9, then it means this condition is true, right? So it's going to jump into this loop. So j is equals to 0. 0 is definitely less than or equals to 9, right? So it will print what? A space. So after printing a space, it will increment the value of j. J is now equals to what? 1. So j is still less than or equals to 9 because 9 is what? Sorry, because I is 9. So 1 is less than or equals to 9. So this condition is true. So it will jump into this loop and print another space. That's why you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces before what? Before you get this particular line of code printed. Okay, it has to loop over to print the spacing before it prints what? The diagonal. So, and this spacing depends on the iteration of I. I just explained that. Okay, so now let's try testing this. So let's compile this GCC. So let's run it. Oops, sorry. So as you can see, we are getting the result here. So this is how the function is supposed to look like. So here, as you can see, we are getting a space. We are also getting space because of this 0. We've set a condition that if it is less than or equals to 0, it should just print a new line. That's why we are getting space at the first call to the function, which is 0 here, and also at the last call to the function, which is a -4 here. Okay, so the reason why they are getting this $sign is because the command is being piped to what? Cat E. So let's pipe our own 2 and see. So did you see that we are getting what? A dollar printed at the end. So this is simply how to print a diagonal on the terminal. I believe this example is clear, right? So don't forget to add, commit, and push to your GitHub repository, and then you can run your checks. So this question here says we should write a function that prints a square followed by a new line. So this is the prototype to the function, and we are only allowed to use putchar function to print. Size is the size of the square, which is the parameter that the function is taking. Size is 0. If size is 0 or less, the function should print a new line. Use the character hash to print the square. So let's look at the output first. So as you can see here, when 2 was passed to the function, we got this part printed because it is a square. So we know that a square has what? All its sides are equal, right? That's a square. All the 4 sides of squares of a square are equal. So that's why here we are having what? 2 rows and 2 columns. By just looking at this, you know that this is not, it is not equal actually, but the number of rows is the same thing as the number of columns. So in this case, we are considering it a square. Look at this one here. We are having what? 10 rows and 10 columns. But by looking at this, you know that this is not a square. Because if you look at this, you will know that the length is not equal to the breadth, right? But because we have the exact number of rows as the number of columns, so we are going to consider this a square for now. Okay, so this is a square. So we are asked to print a square, right? A function that prints a square using the what? Using the hash tag here. So we are going to use the hashtag to print. Okay, so one thing you need to know is that this is the size, right? So this size is the same thing as the number of rows and also is the same thing as the number of columns because we are printing what? A square. So if this parameter here, if 10 is passed as a parameter here, I'm supposed to have 10 rows and 10 columns. If 5 is passed as the parameter, right, I'm supposed to get 5 rows and 5 columns. Isn't it? That's where I'll be able to get a square, right? So it means I need 2 loops to solve this problem. One of the loop is going to keep track of the number of rows and the other is going to keep track of the number of columns, right? So let's open the file and let's see how to write this problem here, how to solve this problem. So paste. So I need to include I forgot to include the function prototype for this. Hash include main.h. Right, so let me document my Betty. So what's the function name? The function name is print square, right? So I'll just say print square, right? So what again? What should I explain? Describe this with? Let me just say print square using the hash character, right? Character. So what again? I need to explain to Betty the parameter, right? At, what's the parameter? Size, right? So I need to explain at size. So let me just say size of the square. Size of the square. Then what again? The function is returning a void, so I need to explain my return statement as well. So I'll just say void here. So here I need to copy and paste the function prototype. So paste, Before that, let me go out and paste the prototype inside my main.h. I forgot to do that. Okay, I have it already. Yeah, no, not that actually. So let me just paste it here. When I saw print diagonal, I actually thought it's the function. Oops, I need to make corrections here. So let me just copy this again, paste here. So I need to add my end if here. I removed it. Yeah, so I think this is fine. So let's go back to our file and begin writing the code. Alright, so how do we solve this problem here? We said we are dealing with squares, right? And here we are given a condition: if size is 0 or less, we should print a new line. So let's deal with this first. So I will say if size is less than or equals to 0. So what are we printing? A new line, right? So I will just say put char /n. So I'm done with this, right? I will now say else, right? That is if the size is greater than 0, right? If it is greater than 0, then what do we need to do? Like I said, we are going to need two loops. The first one will loop over what? The rows, and the second one will loop over the columns. So let me declare the variables I'm going to use for this looping, I and j, right? So let me loop for the rows. So I will say for I equals to 1, I can start from 1 or 0. I already told you how to set the condition if you're using 0 or 1. So I will say I, in this case, since I'm starting from 1, is going to be less than or equals to what? N. Sorry, less than or equals to size, which is the size of the square, right? I'm dealing with what? Rows and columns now, right? So I'm doing the iteration for the row now, in which I said the size is the exact number of row and also the size is the number of columns, since we are dealing with squares, right? So here I will now say size, I plus plus. So this will loop over the rows. So I need to now create the columns inside this row, right? So now I have the rows, right? The row has been created, but I need to place what? All these hash characters inside the rows, which is what? The columns. That's what I need to do now. So I need to say for the condition is going to be the same. For j equals to 1, right? J is going to be less than or equals to size because it is the same. The rows and number of column is the same as the size, right? So this is going to be j plus plus. So now I have a loop for what? For the rows and for the column. So what I want is for each iteration of this column, I want to print what? The character hash, right? I want to print the character hash. So I need to say hash, underscore put char, and then I will pass in what? The character hash. This is what I want to print. So it means that the I is used for creating the rows, right? So for I equals to 1, for the first iteration, when it creates the first row, it will jump into this loop, right? So j will begin iterating from 1. So it will check 1 is less than or equals to size, assuming size is 3. Yes, 1 is less than 3. So it will print what? The hash key, the hash character, J will increment. This condition is true, it will print another hash character. J will increment, this condition is still true because size is 3. Then what? Put char will print another hash character. So now we have 3 hash characters printed, right? So if j increment, this condition, j is now 4 and size is 3, so this condition is not true. So it will move out of this inner loop and go out and increment this I now, right? So in its increment I is now 2, right? It will check 2 is less than or equals to size. Size is 3, yeah, 2 is less than 3. So it will jump into this loop again. It will perform the same operation, right? So as you can see, this one is creating the rows and this one is creating the content inside that row, which is what? The column, right? So here outside the for loop, after printing the hash key, I need to print what? A new line, right? The hash character, I need to print a new line. So this means that after looping all of this, as you can see, after printing the content of the first row, before it moves to the next row, that is before incrementing the value of I, it should create what? A new line. Okay, so now let's test this first. Let's run Betty. So Betty is fine. So let's create the test file now. Copy vi, this is it, main.c. Alright, so paste. So let's go up. So it doesn't matter if your test file is not Betty compliant, okay? They are not going to use your test file to compile the program. They have their own file. They've already stated that clearly above. So now let's compile this and let's see. So compile, paste. Yeah, so it has been compiled. So let's run it. So as you can see, we got the exact output here. As you can see here, they also have what? An extra line here. Just look at this. In this case here, this way I highlight, they have an extra line, that is this line here. Okay, so when you look at this, 2 was passed to the function, we are getting 2 rows and 2 columns. Here, when 10 was passed to the function, we have how many rows? 10 rows and 10 columns. If you can count this, we are having 10 rows and 10 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we are having 10 rows and 10 columns. And here, because we are having a 0, so that's why we are having what? 0 here, an empty space, an empty line. And because we've set a condition to what? To treat any we've set a condition that if the size is 0 or less, it should just print a new line. So that's how we're getting this. So don't forget to add, commit, and push to your GitHub repository, and then you can run your checks. So now let's move on to the next task. So this task here says we should, it says the FizzBuzz test is an interview question designed to help filter out the 99.5% of programming job candidates who can't seem to program their way out of a wet paper bag. So it says write a program that prints the numbers from 1 to 100 followed by a new line, but for multiples of 3 print fizz instead of the number, and for the multiples of 5 print buzz. So for numbers which are multiples of both 3 and 5 print FizzBuzz. Each number or word should be separated by a space. You are allowed to use the standard library. In summary, what this question is asking you to do is this. You are to print numbers from 1 to 100. But among these numbers, there are numbers that are multiples of 3 and also multiple of 5. Right? So what I mean by multiples of 3 and multiple of 5 is this. Any number that can be divided by 3 without remainder, then that number is a multiple of 3. Also, any number that can be divided by 5 without any remainder, then it means that number is a multiple of 5. Right? So any number that can be divided by 3 at the same time can be divided by 5 without remainder, that number is a multiple of both 3 and 5. So if a number is a multiple of 3, we are told to type in fizz instead of displaying the number. If a number is a multiple of 5, we are supposed to type in buzz instead of the number. And if a number is a multiple of both 3 and 5, we are supposed to type in FizzBuzz instead of this number. Let's look at an example here. As you can see here, we have 1, 2, right? And then what? 3 here. So instead of having 3, we are printing fizz because 3 is a multiple of 3. So that's why we are having fizz here. And we are told that if it's a multiple of 3, print fizz. So here we have 4, here we have 5. So 5 here is a multiple of 5 because 5 can divide 5 without remainder. So that's why we're having buzz printed here. Here is 6, right? 6 is a multiple of 3, so that's why we're having fizz. So when you go to 15 now, yes, as you can see 15 we have FizzBuzz. Why do we have FizzBuzz in 15? Because 15 is a multiple of 3 and 5 as well. Okay, if you divide 15 by 3, you will get 5 without remainder. And we are told to print FizzBuzz in such cases. Okay, so now how do we write this function? Sorry, this program. This is not a function, we are writing a program. Okay, so here I'll just say vi, let me open the file. We are going to do this step by step. So I need to include my standard input output, stdio.io.h. Right, so let me document my Betty first. So I'm only going to use my main function here. So let me just call it main function. So just give it another descriptive name, okay? So here, the next thing is what is just the return value. So what is the function returning? It's 0. All right, so here I'll just say int min. So I'll pass in void. So what next? All right, so the first thing we need to do here is simply, we know that we are going to loop from 1 to 100, right? So I'm going to loop from 1 to 100. So int I. So I now say for I equals to 1. I'm starting from 1. You can start from 0. I kept explaining this for you. So what should be the condition? I less than or equals to 100, right? Then I plus plus. So I'm looping from 1 to 100. So inside this for loop, what I need to do is this. I need to check if the number is both multiple of 3 and 5. So I will now say if I, that is for each iteration, it will check is the value of I a modulo of 3, right? If I modulo 3, let me just put them in bracket, if I modulo 3 is equals to 0, right, and also I modulo 5 is equals to 0, what does this mean? It means that that particular value at I is what? A multiple of both 3 and 5. Right? If the value of I divided by 3 is not equals to 0, sorry, it's equals to 0, and also if you divide it by 5 it's still equals to 0, it means it's a multiple of both 3 and 5, because we know that multiples of a number is multiples of to get a multiple of number, it means that that number can be able to be divided by 3 without remainder, and also it can be divided by 5 without remainder, right? So here I need to say if this condition is true, what should happen? I'm only interested in printing what? Fizzbuzz. Right? So if the condition is true, I will print what? Fizzbuzz. I'm told to use the standard library, that I can use the standard library. So I just say printf. We are printing a string, right? So how do we print string? What is the placeholder for string? In printf, we use %s, right? If we want to print string. So here I will pass in what? Fizzbuzz. Take note, the F is in caps, the B is in caps. Okay? So I'm printing Fizzbuzz now. Right? That's what the condition says. If it is a multiple of both 3 and 5, then we should print Fizzbuzz. Okay? So now, the next condition is what? Else if, now I can consider if I is a multiple of 3. So I now say I modulo 3. In the above case, I considered if I is both multiple of 3 and 5. So now if it is a multiple of 3, if I modulo 3 is equals to 0, it means I is a multiple of 3, right? Whatever the value of I is at that position is a multiple of 3. So what should we do? I would just say printf. What am I printing? %s. I'm also printing a string here. So what am I printing? I'm printing fizz. If it is a multiple of 3, it says print fizz. Just look at this. Print fizz. Right? Then what again? I need to set another condition, else if, right? Else if, sorry, now I'm checking for multiple of 5. I modulo 5 is equals to 0. I hope you know why I'm using this modulo, because modulo is used to get the remainder of a division, right? So if the remainder is equals to 0, it means 5 has successfully divided it without any remainder, right? So if it is equals to 0, then I will just say printf. Then what should I print here? %s. I'm also printing a string, so I'll pass in what? Buzz here. So this is going to print buzz anywhere there is a multiple of 5. Okay, so what is the next thing we need to do? The next thing we need to do is else, that is if it is not a multiple of 3, it is not a multiple of 5, and it is not a multiple of both 3 and 5. There are a lot of numbers like that. As you can see, 1, 2, 4, they are all not multiples of 3 and 5. So here I will just say else. Right? So what should happen in the else part is simply that it should just print what? It should just print the number, right? So printf, I will just say %d, because I'm just printing the number now. Right? We are not printing any fizz or buzz. We are printing the exact number as far as it is not a multiple of 3 or 5. Right? So I will just say I in this case. Do you get it? So here outside this loop, I can now print my new line. So here I will just say printf, then /n. So here I can now return my function. So return 0. So it means that after the for loop, after the loop finished running, it's going to print what? A new line, and it's going to return 0 to the function. So let's run Betty on this first. Betty 9. Yeah, so Betty is happy. So let's compile this. Let me copy this. Copy, paste. Yeah, so it has been compiled. So let's run the compiled file. Yeah, so as you can see, we are getting 1, 2 fizz, but it is mixed up, it is jam-packed. So I need to give it a space, right? I forgot to do that. So let's open the file, 9.c, right? So all I need to do here is, when you look at this, we have spacing after each of these numbers, right? And also the words here. But we are not supposed to leave a space at the end, at the last character, which is supposed to be 100, but in this case we are getting buzz, right? We are not supposed to print a space. So we need to set a condition not to print space after printing the last word here, which is buzz, right? So all I need to do here is I can come down here after this else part. After this else, I can just give another if statement. I can just say if my value of I is not equals to what? It's not equals to 100, because 100 is the last character I'm targeting. sorry, is the last digit. We are looping 100 times. So the last iteration, we are not going to print what the space for it, right? So that's why I'm setting if I is not equals to 100. So it's not going to include the 100, the last iteration, right? So if it is not equals to 100, I want to print what is space. So I'll just say printf, double quote, and then give a space, and then end this. So this will give a space after printing each character, or sorry, each digit and also each word, but it will not give a space at the end of the last iteration, which is 100. Okay, so let's test this. Let's compile. So let's run the compiled file. Yeah, so as you can see now, we are having spaces, right? We are having spaces here. So now the last character boss here is not having a space. So now you can add, commit, and push to your GitHub repository. Then you can run your checks. So this is the end of today's session. So thank you very much. To meet in our next session.